Ethan sat outside his small cabin, the evening wind brushing against his face. The forest surrounding his settlement was quiet, almost too quiet. Years of living in isolation had made him sensitive to even the slightest rustle of leaves or snap of a twig. He worked on old machinery all day, repairing engines, fixing broken tools, and keeping his mind busy. He told himself it was peaceful here, far away from the wars and chaos of the galaxy. But peace, he had learned, was never permanent. The sky had started to change, colors shifting in strange patterns like ribbons of light moving across the stars. Ethan froze. There was something familiar about the energy signature, something that tugged at the edges of his memory. He could not place it, not at first, but the feeling was strong. A pulse deep in his chest. He had learned long ago to trust that pulse. He remembered a distant world, a planet far from the trade routes and human colonies. It was a world of rocky terrain and sparse forests, with skies that glowed in green and purple hues. That was where he had met her, Liara. Liara had been unlike anyone Ethan had ever met. She was a warrior of her people, tall and strong, with eyes that glimmered like amber in the sun. Her armor was unlike human designs, light, flexible, and adorned with markings that told the story of her clan. They had been forced to fight together during a sudden invasion on her planet, and despite the danger, they had relied on each other completely. In those moments, Ethan had felt a connection that went beyond words. But fate had been cruel. A sudden attack from rival alien forces had torn them apart. Ethan had escaped with his life, but Liara had vanished. No transmissions, no messages, nothing. The galaxy was too vast, and both had assumed the other was lost. Yet here, under the strange night sky of his own planet, Ethan sensed something stirring. A presence he could not ignore. The sound of metal scraping on stone caught his attention. He turned, his hand resting on the wrench at his side, ready to defend himself if needed. At first there was nothing but the shadows, the trees swaying in the wind. Then he saw her, Liara, stepping carefully through the trees, her armor reflecting the moonlight in a way that made her seem almost unreal. She paused when she saw him. For a moment the years fell away, and Ethan felt as if he were back on that alien world side by side with her, facing impossible odds. Liara's eyes widened and her stance softened. She knelt slightly in the traditional warrior greeting of her people, a mark of respect that transcended their differences. Ethan did not move at first, unsure if this was real or some trick of his mind. Then recognition hit him fully, and he took a cautious step forward. "Liara?" His voice was a mix of disbelief and relief. "Yes," she said simply, her voice calm but carrying the weight of all the years she had spent searching. "I never forgot you, Ethan." They spoke cautiously at first, recounting their separate journeys. Liara told of the endless search across the stars, of battles fought and enemies defeated, of every clue she had followed in the hope of finding him. Ethan shared his quiet life on Earth, the days spent repairing machines, the nights alone under the stars, and the longing he had never admitted to anyone. There was a moment of silence heavy with emotion as they simply looked at each other. Time had changed them both. Ethan's hair had a touch of gray, his movements slower than before, yet there was still a strength in his posture, a reminder of the disciplined soldier he had been. Liara, despite the years of battle, carried herself with the grace and power of a warrior, her eyes still sharp, her presence commanding. Ethan noticed the subtle technology she carried, small devices on her armor glowing softly. They were alien, far beyond anything he had seen on Earth, yet they fit her perfectly, enhancing her natural abilities without hindering movement. He realized how much she had sacrificed, how much effort she had put into finding him, and he felt a deep respect for her determination. But peace was fleeting. As they spoke, a faint hum of engines reached Ethan's ears. He glanced toward the horizon and saw small ships moving in formation, their outlines dark against the fading light. Liara stiffened. "They have found me," she said quietly. "Scouts. They've been following me for months, but I hope to reach you first." Ethan's mind raced. The forest could provide cover, but they were outnumbered, and these were no ordinary enemies. They had the skill and technology to track her across the stars. Yet he refused to feel fear. This was not the first time he had faced impossible odds, and he would not let the woman who had never forgotten him face them alone. They moved quickly, using the trees and terrain for concealment. Liara's instincts guided them, and Ethan's knowledge of the land allowed them to find the perfect position to observe the approaching scouts. Every movement, every sound was calculated. Ethan marveled at her skill, how naturally she adapted to the new environment while maintaining her warrior discipline. As night fell, the enemy ships became more visible, their lights scanning the forest in search of any trace of Liara. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline, the old instincts of a soldier returning. He and Liara communicated silently, gestures and subtle signals coordinating their positions. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, truly part of something larger than himself. Liara spoke softly, almost to herself. "I had to find you, Ethan. Even if it meant crossing half the galaxy, even if it meant facing death 100 times. Ethan looked at her, seeing not just the warrior but the person beneath the armor, the years of hope and longing reflected in her eyes. "And I never stopped hoping you would," he said. "I never forgot either." The scouts landed, small pods touching down lightly on the forest floor. Shadows moved among the trees, their sensors scanning for movement. Ethan tightened his grip on the tools he carried, ready to improvise weapons if needed. Liara stepped beside him, her posture relaxed but alert, every muscle ready to spring into action. The first scout emerged, scanning the area. Ethan held his breath as Liara gestured. They waited, patient, until the scout passed directly beneath their hiding spot. Then, with swift precision, Liara activated a small device, sending a pulse that temporarily disabled the scout's sensors. It stumbled, confused, giving them a critical advantage. Ethan felt a thrill he hadn't experienced in years. Together, they were unstoppable, a combination of human ingenuity and alien warrior skill. But more importantly, they were together. No matter the danger, no matter the odds, they had found each other again. As the night deepened, they knew this reunion was only the beginning. The scouts were just the first wave, and more would follow. Yet for now, Ethan and Liara stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next, united by a bond that time, distance, and danger could never break. The forest was alive with whispers of movement and the faint glow of distant ships, but in that moment, there was only them, and the quiet, undeniable truth that they had survived, against all odds, to find each other once more. This completes Part 1. Setting up the reunion, emotional depth, and immediate threat for Part 2. I can now craft Part 2 fully in 2,000 words, with action, suspense, and resolution, keeping it equally engaging and HFY focused. Do you want me to start Part 2 now? Yes! Here's Part 2 of your story in third person, simple English, fully engaging, violation-free, and continuous without headings. The forest was alive with tension. Shadows shifted under the moonlight as Ethan and Liara moved carefully, aware that more scouts were closing in. The small energy pulse Liara had used earlier was only temporary. Soon the enemy would adjust, and they needed a plan that could stop them completely. Ethan surveyed the area. The forest offered natural advantages: thick trees for cover, uneven terrain to slow the scouts, and hidden ravines that could be used to trap them. "We can use the terrain to our advantage," he said quietly, pointing to a narrow path between two ridges. "If we can funnel them here, we can control the fight." Liara nodded, her amber eyes glinting with focus. "Good, but we must be fast. They are smarter than the scouts we encountered before." She moved with silent precision, checking her armor, her weapons, and the small devices she carried. Ethan watched her, feeling a mix of awe and reassurance. She was a warrior, unmatched in skill, yet she had trusted him to help. As the first wave of enemy scouts entered the narrow path, Ethan and Liara sprang into action. Liara used a combination of martial skill and advanced weapons, striking swiftly to disable the scouts one by one. Ethan improvised, using traps and clever tactics to turn fallen branches and rocks into obstacles. The scouts were strong and fast, but the human and alien combination was faster and smarter. Despite their success, the scouts were only the beginning. From the tree line, more enemies emerged, larger and more technologically advanced than the first. They had suits that enhanced strength and speed, and weapons that could cut through ordinary armor. Ethan's heart raced. This was the real test. Liara grabbed his arm, guiding him to a small hidden ridge overlooking the path. "We need a distraction," she said. "I can draw some away, but you must be ready." Ethan understood immediately. The plan was risky, but they had no choice. Liara moved forward, visible to the scouts, her armor shining in the moonlight. She fought with elegance and deadly precision, drawing the enemy's attention. Ethan stayed hidden, waiting for the right moment. He remembered the lessons of his past battles. The forest was tense, alive with the quiet hum of approaching ships. Ethan and Liara crouched behind a cluster of trees, their breathing steady but hearts pounding. The enemy scouts were close, their sensors flickering faintly in the darkness. Ethan felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. Years ago, he had trained for situations like this, yet nothing had prepared him for the sight of Liara beside him. A living memory of a past he thought he had lost forever. Liara's amber eyes scanned the horizon, and she whispered, "They are organized. Faster than the last group I encountered. We must move carefully." Ethan nodded. He studied the terrain, noting every dip in the ground, every cluster of rocks that could serve as cover. Together they began to move quietly, weaving through the undergrowth. Their steps synchronized as if they had fought together every day. The first scout emerged from the shadows, a humanoid figure in sleek armor with glowing lines running across its body. It moved cautiously, scanning the trees. Ethan held his breath, gripping a long, reinforced branch he had sharpened into a makeshift weapon. Liara signaled to him, her hand pointing toward a narrow path between two rocky ridges. They had a plan, one that relied on timing and patience. When the scout reached the path, Liara leapt forward, her movements swift and fluid. She struck with precision, disabling the scout before it could react. Ethan followed her lead, tossing a small trap that sent vines and wires springing up, entangling two more scouts and knocking them off balance. The forest erupted into motion, shadows dashing through the trees, clashing weapons and sparks flying from alien devices. Ethan marveled at her skill. Liara moved like a storm, precise and unstoppable. Her weapons glowed faintly as they cut through alien armor, each strike calculated, yet she was careful, ensuring none of her attacks would be lethal unless necessary. Ethan realized something remarkable. Despite the years apart and the battles she had fought alone, she had not lost the respect for life that he remembered. The first wave was repelled, but from the tree line, a larger threat appeared. Advanced scouts, taller and more heavily armored, stepped into view. They moved with mechanical precision, their weapons humming with energy. Ethan's pulse quickened. These were not ordinary enemies, they were highly trained, technologically enhanced and relentless. He exchanged a glance with Liara. She returned it with quiet determination. "Follow my lead," she whispered. Ethan nodded. Together they moved to higher ground, using rocks and fallen trees as cover. Liara's armor emitted a faint pulse, cloaking them momentarily from the sensors of the approaching scouts. Ethan observed, learning her methods, and felt a surge of admiration. This was a warrior beyond any human measure, yet she trusted him to fight by her side. The enemy leader emerged last, a towering figure with a glowing visor and a weapon that pulsed with energy. It scanned the area and Ethan noticed its calculated movements, the slight delay after each strike. He whispered this to Liara, who nodded subtly. They adjusted their positions, using the terrain to create an advantage. The first clash was intense. Liara moved like a shadow, striking and dodging with unmatched agility. Ethan used traps, rocks, and fallen branches to slow the leader's movements. Each blow Liara delivered weakened the enemy, but its strength and armor made it a formidable opponent. Sparks flew as weapons collided, lighting up the dark forest in bursts of brilliance. Ethan realized they could not win with strength alone. He needed to exploit the enemy's pattern. Remembering the slight delay after each attack, he timed his traps perfectly, releasing weighted logs that struck at the leader's joints. Liara used the opening to strike at weak points in the armor, her weapons glowing brighter with each precise hit. The enemy roared, a sound that shook the trees, and retaliated with a burst of energy from its weapon. Ethan dove aside, narrowly avoiding the blast. Liara rolled, coming up behind it with a rapid series of strikes. The combination of human strategy and alien skill proved too much. The leader faltered, and the remaining scouts, seeing their commander disabled, retreated into the shadows. For a moment, silence returned. The forest was calm, broken only by the labored breathing of Ethan and Liara. They surveyed the area, ensuring no immediate threats remained. Ethan felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. Together, they had survived impossible odds, just as they had all those years ago on that distant planet. Liara turned to him, her expression softening. "You have grown, Ethan, not just in skill but in heart. I am proud to fight beside you." Ethan felt warmth rise in his chest. "And I am glad you never gave up on finding me," he replied. his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. They made their way back to a clearing, where the first light of dawn was filtering through the trees. Liara's ship, hidden among the foliage, glowed softly in the morning light. She gestured toward it. "We must leave soon. More scouts will come if they sense I am missing. But with you by my side, I am ready." Ethan nodded, realizing that his quiet life on Earth was ending. For the first time in years, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. As they prepared the ship for departure, Ethan helped Liara secure equipment, marveling at the alien technology. Small devices adjusted automatically, enhancing shields and communication systems. Liara worked in tandem with him, guiding his hands and explaining the purpose of each tool. They moved with the ease of longtime partners, their trust and understanding unspoken but complete. Finally, the ship lifted off, gliding silently above the forest. Ethan looked out the viewport, taking in the landscape he had called home for years. He realized that leaving it behind did not feel like loss. It felt like the start of something far greater. Liara watched him with a quiet smile, sensing his thoughts. They traveled through space, moving quickly to avoid detection by any remaining enemy forces. Liara shared stories of her people, their culture, and their code of honor. Ethan listened intently, fascinated by the depth of her experiences. In turn, he shared his knowledge of Earth, its people, and the lessons he had learned in solitude. Each story, each memory, strengthened the bond between them. Days passed in this way, their journey a mixture of strategy, storytelling, and quiet companionship. Ethan learned to operate some of the ship's systems, adapting quickly, while Liara marveled at his ingenuity. She had fought countless battles, but she had never met a human with such cleverness and resourcefulness. And Ethan, in turn, was inspired by her resilience and unwavering determination. One night, while traveling near a cluster of uncharted planets, they stopped to rest in orbit around a small green world. The stars reflected off the ship's hull, and for the first time both felt a sense of peace. They stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the vast galaxy. Liara spoke softly. "We have survived impossible odds to find each other. Whatever comes next, I am ready, as long as you are with me." Ethan smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "Together," he said simply. It was more than a promise, it was a declaration of trust, partnership, and hope. The next morning they began planning their next move. Liara had received intelligence that other enemy forces were regrouping, but this time they would be prepared. Ethan contributed strategies blending human creativity with Liara's combat expertise. Their plan was meticulous, ensuring they could strike decisively if needed. As they trained and prepared, their relationship deepened. Moments of laughter, quiet conversation, and shared experiences created a bond that transcended species. Ethan realized that he had never truly understood the meaning of partnership until now. Liara, in turn, acknowledged that she had never met anyone with the courage, intelligence, and heart that Ethan possessed. Weeks passed as they explored the galaxy, confronting small threats and helping those in need. Each challenge reinforced their respect and trust. Liara's people, observing from afar, began to recognize Ethan as an honorary warrior, a human capable of standing alongside their fiercest defenders. Finally, they approached a massive space station orbiting a distant star. Liara explained that it was a hub for diplomatic missions and trade negotiations. "We will need allies," she said, "and it is time for you to see the broader galaxy. There is much to fight for, and I cannot do it alone." Ethan nodded, ready for the challenges ahead. He had left Earth behind, but in doing so he had gained something far greater: purpose, partnership, and a chance to make a difference across the stars. Liara placed her hand on his shoulder, and together, they prepared to step onto the station. As the airlock opened, they were greeted by the bustling energy of the galaxy. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved about, conducting business, negotiating, and sharing stories. Ethan felt a surge of excitement and determination. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but with Liara by his side, he was ready to face anything. The story closed with Ethan and Liara standing together on the observation deck of the station, looking out at the stars. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, full of danger, wonder, and opportunity. For Ethan, it was the start of a new chapter, one that would test him, inspire him, and ultimately prove that humans, when driven by courage and heart, could face the impossible in triumph. And for Liara, It was the fulfillment of a promise, a reunion that had defied time, distance, and war. Together they were ready to shape the future.